A very warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer, the vlog which explores and celebrates the London art scene. Coming up. I'm hot-footing it to Tate Britain today to explore the newly opened blockbuster summer show, which pairs together two British artists, Burra and Ithell Colquhoun. When I think of Burra, I think of works that are very busy and urban. I remember seeing a show of his Harlem paintings at Tate way back in the 2000s. And when I think of Colquhoun, I obviously think of surrealism. I'm really interested to see how Tate pairs these works, because it is a single ticket for this show. It's £18 to see both artists. In some ways they have similarities, like an interest in the occult and an interest in queer culture, but in other ways they're very different. So is this going to work? I'm not sure. I haven't read anything about it, so I'm just going to go along with an open mind and enjoy the works and bring them to you. This show's on until the 19th of October. Come and join me as we head inside. When I entered the exhibition, it became clear these were two separate shows, so I've covered them separately within this vlog, and you can skip between them. If you're going to the show, you might want to skip straight forward to the review. But if you're not able to get to this show for any reason, sit back, enjoy the art, and please do change the music if it's not your taste. I put some jazz on for Burra to start us off, but do mute it if you just want to look at the works. Enjoy. Well, art lovers, this is actually turned into probably my longest ever vlog inadvertently. That was not my intention. But the reason for that is that these two shows on Burra and Colquhoun are, to all intents and purposes, pretty comprehensive retrospectives on their own. So when you combine them together, it's a big kind of show, and it's taken me quite a long time to edit as a result. I did flirt with separating them, but I wanted to put them together because clearly they're a part of the same ticket price. So if you're going and you get a ticket for the day, you will want to see them together on one day. And secondly, the Tate have paired these artists because they do share some similarities, not just the times of their lives and the times they were painting, but also because they did share similar interests in the occult, in portraying non-heterosexual sexuality at a time when that was very much frowned upon in mainstream England, and also because they were interested in kind of alternative lifestyles at a time when Britain was quite a traditional moral country, certainly in the earlier period when they were painting. I would say that, you know, I can see why Tate have paired them. There are many differences to these artists as well, not least the stylistically, Colquhoun was very much a surrealist and interested in pushing the boundaries, whereas Burra flirted with surrealism but was much more figurative for most of his career. And secondly, their favoured mediums produced very different art. Burra's favourite medium was watercolour, and this show reminded me that he is a absolute master of watercolour, whereas Colquhoun's, for her big works, although she did use watercolours, preferred medium is oil. So my big advice with this exhibition, before we dig down into the art itself, is pace yourselves. I went straight from one to the other, not realising how big they were both going to be. I found myself flagging halfway through the Colquhoun show. So I would have sort of split them up and gone and had a cup of tea or coffee halfway through. So if you're a Tate member, I advise you do that. And if you've got a day ticket, check. I'm pretty sure you can sort of go into one, have a break in the cafe, which is downstairs where the galleries are, and then come back into the other, because they are epic shows. But I did enjoy them both, and I think, as I say, £18 is really generous. Okay, well, let's think about the art, and I'm going to think first of all about Edward Burra's show, because I went into that first. I must confess straight up, I've never loved his art. I've liked bits of it, but I never loved it for reasons I'll explain. And so I was interested to see if this really comprehensive retrospective would change my mind. And there was a lot of good about this show. Firstly, the range. It was a whole career retrospective, from going from the 1930s all the way towards the end of his life, including some of the last works that he ever produced. And I did particularly enjoy the first three rooms, with the bustling sense of humanity, sometimes taking us to sort of the seedier areas of urban human life, and also very celebratory in lots of ways. And I absolutely loved, as I'll come on to, the final room as well. And also, there were some really stellar loans here, including over 50%, I would estimate, of these works came from private collections. So huge kudos to the Tate for being able to gather so many works that are usually not seen by regular art lovers. In terms of the bad, the thing that holds me back, and it still does, I have to report after seeing this show about Burra's work, is that although he does portray teeming humanity well en masse, his individuals don't feel like fully formed human beings. They feel like caricatures to me. Lots of his work is satirical. And so you don't feel you're kind of penetrating into the soul of these humans. There's a sort of barrier there. And that's why it kind of left me a little bit queasy about the Harlem works. I know they're widely admired in some circles, but for me, the Harlem works sort of border on stereotype and caricature in a way which left me a little bit uncomfortable. But let me know in the comments if you agree with that. And also, I did think that the wall works didn't work as well aesthetically as the works that came before them. The busyness kind of like cluttered things a little bit. And in fact, he was at his best in the wall works when he stripped things back, like in this work, The Torturers, which I did find chilling. And it kind of had homoerotic undertones as well. And it's very, very simple compared to lots of the works. And with his wall works as well, there was a sense that he wasn't just sort of once removed, but almost twice removed. And so there was a distance in these works which made them, for me, less powerful and effective. But again, post in the comments whether you agree or not. In terms of the beautiful, The final room for me was an absolute revelation. He became, in his later years, travelling around Britain with his sister's car, a kind of pop artist. And these, I'd never seen these works together. And for me, these are masterpieces. These are, unlike the works that came before, which are quite good, great works, in my opinion. He even portrays human beings, as you can see here, with a little bit more depth and a little bit more personality. But it's the way he captures Britain, both in its modern incarnations with the trucks and the petrol stations, and also in its ancient grandeur. These works were absolutely beautiful, and I really enjoyed them. I love the eco work, Picking a Quarrel, which puts us very much in the mind of where Burra felt about development. Really interesting work as well. And one thing it should be said about Burra is that he very rarely sketched, apparently, on these journeys. There's just one example from a sketchbook for Picking a Quarrel. But, people who observed him work said that he would capture scenes and moments in his mind and then produce them on canvas, sometimes months later. A really interesting way of working. And I should say, in terms of the beautiful, these are some of the most powerful kind of punchy watercolors across his whole work that I've seen. Watercolor is his medium of choice, and I love that. I love seeing such a skilled practitioner of watercolor. So this was a really good end to the show, and in that sense, I really enjoyed that bit of it. In terms of Colquhoun, I found, again, it was a little bit patchy, but I really enjoyed bits of it. I found the first two rooms disappointing. I mean, I think her early work, before she discovered surrealism, is pretty ghastly. Do you agree with me? Post in the comments these kind of religious paintings. And I found the Into Surrealism room, with a couple of exceptions, a bit disappointing, a bit tame. For me, the exhibition came alive in the third room, the Mantic Stain, where she's producing these, what I found anyway, incredibly beautiful works. She was influenced very much by trying to unlock her subconscious and her unconscious. She used the surrealist technique of psychic automation, where she was basically trying to paint without thinking. And these works were really, really interesting. In some of the works which you're seeing now from this time, she used a process called decalcomania, where she would apply ink or paint to a surface, then press another surface against it. And this process creates abstract images, which she then developed into finished works. And it reminded me what a wonderful colorist she was. There was some exquisite capturing of colour in this. I also really enjoyed seeing her influence of the occult. The exhibition points out she was kind of massively influenced by the occult revival of the 19th and early 20th century. And there's this tremendous openness in the way that she portrays the masculine and the feminine coming together to create what she called the divine androgyny, this kind of powerful figure which combines both. And I love the fact that, unlike Burra, she's very explicit in her interest in both same-sex relationships, in the occult. She's not just hinting at it. And in some ways, she seemed very, very modern in that sense. So I did get a lot out of those middle rooms. I thought it tailed off a tiny bit in the final room. I did enjoy the penultimate room, where we see her sort of love of Celtic landscapes in Cornwall and other places as well come through. They're slightly strange and really interesting. So overall, if I was giving this show a rating out of 10, for the art alone, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. But for an experience, for a show, and for the outstanding value, I would give this a 8.5 out of 10. I think £18 is terrific value. I'd have happily paid £15, £16 for each show. Well done, Tate, for that. And they're really interesting artists. These works are colourful, they're enjoyable, they're different enough to get two really different experiences. Please, if you agree or disagree with me, post in the comments. I love reading your thoughts on these shows. This show is on until the 19th of October. Do go along. It's really good value, and the Tate deserves big numbers for these shows. Thank you ever so much for watching, and stay tuned for much more art over the next few weeks.